Hey guys, Shay from Metra Electronics. Last year, we released 4 plug-and-play audio kits for the Jeep Wrangler JL from 2018 to 2024, offering solutions for both factory amplified and non-amplified audio systems. Now, we've expanded our Jeep lineup with 4 new audio kits for the Jeep Gladiator JT, once again offering solutions for both factory amplified and non-amplified systems. These audio kits for the Jeep Gladiator use the same components as the previous kits, but now offer a custom-designed subwoofer enclosure for a single 12-inch woofer that fits perfectly under the rear seat. So let's install the JP-PPKT-5 on a 24 Jeep Gladiator. First, we start off by disconnecting the negative battery terminal using a 10mm socket wrench. Now we begin with the dash speakers. Using a panel tool, remove the factory grille. Now remove the 2 screws securing the speaker. Using a pick tool, disconnect the speaker harness. Follow the same procedure for the passenger side. Now to remove the lower dash. To remove the lower dash, to install the JP-1014 speaker pods, we start by removing the top dash. Using a pick tool, remove the insert covering the screws in the tray above the radio. Remove the 4 screws, and then, using a panel tool, pry the pocket up and remove. Remove the screws holding the front trim. Remove the trim by pulling it towards you and it will unsnap. Next, we need to remove the screws behind the handle on the passenger side of the vehicle. There is a panel on the back side of the handle. Use a pick tool to remove the panel and then remove the 3 screws. Now, remove the side panel and remove the visible screws at the top. This will free the trim. With those screws removed, use a panel tool to pull the trim from the handle, undo the harness from the AC controls and from the push to start button, and remove. Remove the 2 8mm bolts and other screws to then remove the handle. Now to remove the glove box. Push up on the tab in the center of the opening and let the box open downward. Remove the dampener on the left side of the box and lift up on the glove box to remove. Now to remove the radio display. Remove the 5 screws on the top of the radio across to the gauge cluster. Then pull the display forward and unclip from the dash. Remove the connections from the back of the display. Remove the panel on the driver's side and remove the visible screws. Remove the lower dash panel below the steering column. Remove the 2 screws on the lower shroud around the steering column. Remove the screws behind the light control, then pull the panel and separate the upper and lower panels, and put them aside to install the JP-1020 later. On the passenger side, remove the screws behind the side panel and remove the 2 screws below the glove box. Pull the panel out and put the panel aside to install the JP-1020. Now let's remove the factory speaker pods. On the driver's side, remove the 3 screws securing the pod in place. Remove the 2 8mm bolts on the lower support brace to make the pod removal easier. Remove the pod and disconnect the pod harness and the harnesses attached to the module attached to the pod on the driver's side. On the passenger side, remove the 3 screws securing the pod and disconnect the pod and remove. Now let's set up the JP-1014 speaker pods. Starting with the driver's side, remove the control module from the factory pod and install on the new JP-1014 with the same factory screws. Remove the 3 screws securing the factory speaker into the pod. Remove and disconnect the factory speaker. Remove the grommet from the factory pod and install it into the JP-1014. Now, follow the same procedure for the passenger side pod. To prepare the pod, remove the tabs to allow the installation of the speakers. And use the included speaker harness to connect the new speaker and secure the speaker into the pod. Follow the same procedure for the other pod. Now install our new pods back into the Jeep. Connect the pod to the harness and secure the pod back in place with the 3 screws removed previously. On the driver's side, connect the harnesses to the pod and the 2 harnesses to the control module on the back of the pod. Move the pod in place and secure with the 3 screws you removed previously. Reinstall the 2 8mm bolts on the lower bracket. We will install the panels back after installing the JP-1020s. Now let's cut the lower dash and install the JP-1020 speaker grill kit. After installing the templates on the dash panels, it's time to cut. Using an oscillating saw, cut the areas marked out by the templates. I'm starting with the driver's side panel. Now onto the passenger side. After cutting the template, we need to drill out the points for the guide pins and the mounting points for the mounting plate. Then, we remove the templates and clean up the cut by removing the plastic from our dash panel. Now, using Unibit, enlarge the holes to the proper size to allow the mounting points to fit into the dash panel. Once the finding plate fits, we can attach the grills. Now follow the same procedure for the passenger side.
What's up?
Now to start on our amp install, we need to remove the seats. Using a T50 Torx, remove the 4 seat bolts. Tilt the seat back and disconnect the safety harnesses. Use the buddy system to make it easier. Under the passenger seat, you'll find a grommet. Remove the grommet and put it aside for prepping the install of the amp power wire. At the battery, decide where you want to place the fuse holder and cut the lead to length. Then you can set up your fuse holder on the workbench. Setting up the fuse holder is easy. Cut the lead length from the power wire supplied. Strip the wire back so it will fit into one side of the fuse holder. Using a T25 Torx, remove the collar in the fuse holder and install the 4-gauge power wire. You can follow the same procedure for the other side of the fuse holder. At the battery, use a 10mm nut driver to remove one of the available nuts off the stud to install the ring terminal. I suggest cutting the terminal cover to allow easier placement onto the battery. You can then feed the power wire down the firewall towards the ground to run along the frame to the grommet location under the passenger seat. Secure the power wire along the factory wire harness running down the frame rail.
What's up?
Make sure to secure the power wire away from any hot areas like the exhaust headers. To prepare the grommet, using a Unibit, drill out a hole to allow the 4-gauge power wire to pass through. Then install the power wire through the grommet and put the grommet back in place. Now let's prepare the amps. Install the Vibe DSP amp on the amp rack. Now install the sub amp onto the amp rack. Install the power, ground, and remote wires into the sub amp, securing the wires to the amp rack. Now install the power and ground wires into the DSP amp. All right, for your amplified JL Wrangler, so what we have here is this is the AX Amp CH8 interface. So what this gives you the ability to do is it comes with its T-harness that plugs in behind the radio, and it actually gives you an RCA output. On our non-amplified systems, we went high-level input into the DSP amp. Well, with this, we actually get to use RCAs. So you'll go in the kit, you'll get two 6-foot set of RCAs, which are kind of paired up right now. There's also that remote wire that'll plug into that interface. Behind the radio, you have your T-harnesses that are going to plug into the outputs there, and then you'll snake this down back behind the glove box. So this will plug into that CH8 interface. Coming off or that interface, there is 2 wires, these orange and black wires. These are for a bass knob that are in the kit if you want to have extra control of that low frequency. But in most cases, we're going to let the DSP amp do all that work. The last part in this amplified system is how you're going to collect all your speakers at the factory amp. So we include this amp bypass harness. With the factory bypass harness, you're going to be able to collect all the speakers behind where the factory amp is, which is going to be back below that driver's side pod. And then it'll run down along the dash, and I'll show you the install of this. It'll then run down along over to the amp, and what's great is we have all these labels on the wires, so you collect everything, your tweeters, your sound bar, your pods, and they all are going to be labeled to go directly into your DSP amp, so there's no question. Of course, it's also labeled there in the instructions as well, but we make this as simple as possible for you. All right, so now it's time to load the tune. So our Vibe DSP amplifier has a tune available online for you to download. You're going to see that instruction sheet that is in the box with it. However, the easiest way to really do this is go to our website, metraonline.com. Once you're there, you can put in any of the Jeep part numbers. It's better if you put in the specific one so you can actually get the right tune. Once you click that, if you see there's 2 instruction manual links there. That first one is going to be the paper piece that you see here. The second one is actually going to take you to that landing page. When you get to that landing page, you can scroll down to Jeep. Of course, then you get into your vehicle-specific application. In this case, we're talking about a 24 and up non-amplified system. And once we get into that, if you look over the right-hand side, the tree that's there, you're going to scroll all the way down to where it says DSP setup. From here, we have 2 things for you to download. First one is the Vibe DSP software. This software is going to be specific for this Vibe amplifier. So you're going to download that exe file, and then you're going to want to install that onto your PC. The second download you need to take care of is the specific tune. So we're talking about this kit here, in this case, the JP-PPKT-5. So I'm going to download that tune. Now, when you download this file, make sure you know where it goes. So if I click here, I see my browser's downloading it for me. So I've got the initial part ready. I've got this, so I've already gone through, I've actually already installed my software for my Vibe product here. So you're going to need a USB-C cable to connect to your Vibe amp. Now, you have 2 ways you could do this. You can power the amp up on the workbench like I'm doing here, or while the amp's already installed in the vehicle, you could do that. Pretty simple. You plug that USB-C into the amplifier, and you're going to see, as I open up the software, the minute I plug in the amp, the USB from the amplifier, you're going to see the software start to recognize. If it doesn't, you can press to connect. You're going to see it's reading the data. So what it's doing is actually going in and getting us ready to set up this amplifier. So once you see this volume knob and you look at the notes up here, you're going to want to click on settings. And this is going to bring you, now this basically shows you all 8 channels on this amplifier. 6 that are hard, and then 2 that are going to be your output. What we need to do is we need to load our tune. So if we come up here to the top left of the screen where it says load, we're going to click load, and we're going to load file, and we're going to go to wherever we just downloaded that file from. So in this case, I'm going to go to my downloads folder. There's my tune. I'm going to double click on the tune. It's going to automatically load into the software. And now you're going to see the screen change a little bit because now there are some different cue points. So what we've done is we've actually gone through now and we're looking at all the different settings for each individual channel of this DSP amp. So the tune's loaded. Well, now we have to save it. So right back up where we hit load, right below that is save. We're going to click save. We're going to save DSP. At this point, you're going to see there are 6 preset banks you can have. We only need one of them. So we're going to put a title in here. So JL Tune. And we're going to click Save DSP. And once you get the Save Successful message, you've successfully imported the tune from the download on your computer to the Vibe DSP amp. So now, when we go back out, we can close this out. You'll see if I close everything here, if I disconnect the app, we'll open up our software one more time just to show you. Plug that amp back in. You're gonna see it's gonna recognize the amp. Now when I go into the settings, you're gonna see all our tune is there. And that is how you load the tune on your Vibe DSP. Then install the 4-gauge power wire from the battery into the distribution block. On a non-amplified system, we have to install separate speaker wires to catch the tweeters. On an amplified system, you can just use the speaker harness at the dash location. Connect the T-harness of the AX amp behind the radio to the factory harness. Then, route the connector from behind the radio to behind the glove box. Connect to the AX amp module. Run the 2 sets of RCAs and the remote wire up to the AX amp module and connect them to the front and rear outputs of the AX amp. Connect the 2-pin harness with the remote wire into the AX amp. Now, run the RCAs with remote wire to the DSP amp. Connect the small white plug into the high-level input of the amp. So on an amplified Jeep system, we're able to collect all the speakers from the factory amplifier. So what we have is this is an amp bypass harness. Now the difference is with this one versus some of the other ones we have, this is actually the full length. It's going to go all the way from the factory amp behind the left lower dash speaker where the factory amp is, and it gives you the line and run all the way over to the pass-through side. Now if you notice on the speaker lines here, everything's labeled, so it tells you exactly which amp to plug in which channel and everything. Because using the factory amp, we're able to collect the dash speakers separately, the upper dash, the lower dash, and the sound bar. So then on the other side, we're going to be unplugging the 2 plugs that plug into the factory amp. Unplug those 2 and then plugging them into these harnesses basically feeds this harness, and then we collect all 6 speaker locations. So the factory amp location, as we mentioned, is behind this lower left dash speaker. So your factory amp connection is right here behind the OBD port. You have your factory amp. There's 3 wires going into that amp. We're gonna unplug 2 of them. That one and that one are gonna be our 2 plugs that we need to unhook. And there's our factory amp bypass. We're collecting all. Just below the center console is a ground point. Using a 10mm socket, remove the nut and install the 8-gauge ground wire from the DSP amp. Install the 8-gauge power wire from the DSP amp to the power distribution block using a T25 Torx. Route the speaker wires to the output of the amp. Cable tie the wires to the amp rack for wire management. For the sub-amp under the driver's seat, use a 10mm socket to remove the nut at the ground point by the console. Attach the 8-gauge ground wire from the sub-amp to the ground point. Plug in the 3-foot RCA into the sub-amp and route the RCA, power wire, and remote wire through the center console to the DSP amp under the passenger seat. Connect the power wire to the distribution block. Plug the orange remote wire into the matching wire at the DSP amp. Plug the RCA into the output of the DSP amp. Now, let's install the dash speakers. First, we need to prep the speaker plate adapters. I suggest attaching the adapter to a scrap piece of wood, then using a hole saw, make the cuts. Now, mount the tweeter into the plate adapter with the included hardware. And then as far as speaker adapter goes, so you can just push these pins into the speaker adapter. So white's positive, black is negative. So if we go black to black, red to white, we are now ready to install the speaker tweeter into the dash. We're gonna plug our tweeter harness into. All right, so now that's connected. Then we're gonna stuff everything down here in the dash. And then once everything's all tucked away, the speaker plate's gonna fit into place. Put back in. And that'll install our tweeter. Do the same for the other side. Now it's time for the soundbar. First, we need to remove the factory grills. Remove the 4 Allen bolts securing the grill, and then unplug the map light. Put the grill aside for later. Remove the 2 speakers and the port from the soundbar. Do the same on the other side. All right, moving on to the soundbar. So we've got our soundbar prepped. Well, now it's time to install the brand new JP-1019 soundbar speaker plate adapter. Now, what's great about this is now we took out the factory grill, right? It has the map light included. How's that look there? Well, the JP-1019 is gonna give us that new mesh grill, and it has a place to put the map light. So we're simply gonna transfer the plate, the map light that's there, to this piece, and it all looks seamless and integrated. Now, to get ready for this, we have to basically prep our plate, our template. So just like all of our speaker plate adapters, they are available for different speaker sizes. That's what these ears are for. So we're gonna break off these ears so we can fit our 6-inch speaker. Also on here is our tweeter plate. So we always mark a center point on our tweeter plate so that when you use the hole saw, basically what's great is, all you have to do is line up that drill bit when that center mark on the hole saw, and it's gonna be centered every time. So when all said and done, we're gonna have a mid-range and a tweeter, which are gonna be our Vibe 6.5-inch and 1-inch tweeter. In this plate, we'll do this twice so it mounts right back up in that soundbar to give us our rear stage. So now remove the tabs and drill out the hole for the tweeter on the JP-1019 plate. This will let you know what we need to trace and cut out of the soundbar. With the plates prepped, we need to install them into the soundbar and trace the cutting area. Install the ring into the soundbar with the included screws. Do the same on the other side. Mark the area that needs to be cut. I'm using a silver marker. Now remove the plate and see the marked area that needs to be cut. I recommend using oscillating saw to make the cuts. If you don't feel comfortable making the cuts with the soundbar installed in the vehicle, our detailed instructions give you step-by-step instruction on how to remove it. If remaining in the vehicle, be careful not to cut too deep. Use the saw to cut the area that you marked prior. Be sure not to cut the wiring in the soundbar. Follow the same procedure on the other side. All right, so now we're going to assemble the JP-1019. So we've done all the cutting into the soundbar. Now we got the different things. So we're doing our 6-inch mid-range. We got our tweeter, and of course we've got our plates, which we've already cut the tabs out. We got the spot for the tweeter. I'll show you how we're going to transfer that map light over. But a couple things first. So in the JP-1019 kit, you are going to get this 12-inch speaker harness. Now this is, of course, only got one set of outputs. Now with the tweeter is going to come with a little pigtail on it, and it's going to come with a spool of wire. The spool of wire has an inline capacitor as a filter, and this long bunch of wire. Well, we don't need all this long bunch of wire, so what we can do is once we connect make the connections to the tweeter itself, right after that inline capacitor, kind of give it a little bit of a cut right then and there, and this is garbage. We don't need that anymore. What we're then going to do is we're going to splice off of this. We're going to cut this back, and taking our speaker adapter, we are going to, I like to twist. So I cut here, because now we're going to do is we're going to splice our tweeter in with our mid-range, so they are in parallel, and it acts as kind of a coaxial up in there in the sound bar. So I'm going to then strip back on my speaker harness, crimp that on there. So now we have the ends of the speaker harness that we cut off, and we have the ends of our tweeter. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this back here. We've already pulled the lines back. Now on the tweeter, you'll see there's a black with a red line, and then there's a straight black. That red line is your positive, which on our speaker harness is going to be the white. So we're going to wrap those two together. And then just connecting them together, white to white, crimping that, and then our black to black, crimp that. So now we have the connections to our tweeter. This will connect to the ports on the speaker itself. And all of this will be tucked up into the soundbar, so we don't have to worry about extra cable management. So we'll do that again on this other side, and then we'll mount everything into the speaker plate. There's the speaker harness that's going to plug into the soundbar. I've got the tweeter lines right there, and this is going to go to the mid-range driver. So it's just some basic some cable management that I've done that'll go right up there in the soundbar. Now we're going to mount the speakers into the bracket. So when you're mounting these, you've got a flat side, and then you've kind of got where the stems are up. You want to put the flat side to the ceiling so that these are extending down. So we're going to put the mid-range into the opening here. We're going to find our holes that line up, and we're going to mount the screws in there. So got some screws here. Line up my holes. Get a couple started, and then we'll screw them all together, and we'll do that twice. Now with the tweeter, we have our opening cut. So the tweeter obviously slides through the top there. And then on the back side, in the kit, you've got two different types of mounts. These mounts are kind of a compression style. Once they kind of come over the tweeter, they're going to kind of latch into that frame there. You have to kind of get that pushed all the way in. They both kind of do the same thing. I prefer using these, but they're both in the kit. You do what's best for you. Now, whenever you're using these guys, just cut the ears off. That's in there, you see that it's going to be sitting nice and pretty, and then we have our connections there. So then from there, we of course have our, so once again the tweeter wires are going to plug right into their harnesses. So red to red, black to black. And then said white's positive, black is negative. So looking at here, there's a positive, negative there. So there's your positive, there's your negative. And now this is ready to get mounted up into the soundbar, and we'll do that one more time. All right, so we've assembled our speakers into our frames. We got our wire management done there. Now we're going to take the factory map light, which is located on the factory grill, and our new JP-1019s actually have that same spot. So using a T25, we're basically going to get into these two screws here. And then that map light fits exactly into the new location. On the JP-1019, you see that it's still nice and flush there. And just using those same screws, put them right back into place. So you see those map lights are now mounted back in the factory into the new grills, and they look nice and factory, right? So there we are. So now we'll get ready to put everything into the Jeep. All right, now before we put these into the car, one last thing is you'll see in the kit, we do give you this set of foam tape. Now the foam tape is to basically go around the edge of the trim piece, because when the grills match up against it, it'll help prevent any rattling up there in the sound bar. So we're going to take a minute here and we're just going to apply the foam around the edge of the template and mounting plate to help prevent any rattle. So now, with the JP-1019 loaded and ready, we can install it into the soundbar and connect the speaker harnesses to the factory harnesses in the soundbar. Attach the loaded JP-1019 frame into the soundbar with the same screws we used previously. Attach the harness to the factory map light on the new grill. Then, attach the grill to the bracket with the 5 included screws. Now, follow the same steps on the other side for the loaded speaker plate, connect the map light, and mount the grill. Okay, so now it's time to send the wire to the amp for the sub enclosure. So in the kit, you have your speaker wire. It's gonna be a little bit longer because we also use it for our Wrangler installs, but you just cut the length, so it's about 3.5, 4 foot. And what we're gonna do is just gonna run this over by the amp. It's gonna run down along the edge here. It's gonna kind of come over, and you can just pop it up through the carpet area here. And then we'll wire it into the amp here in a second. All right, so on our Vibe sub enclosure, we have a Vibe proprietary connector. So the speaker that's in there is a dual voice coil. So what we need to do is you take this plug out and you're gonna wire it to where the negative on the far end, positive on the far end, you're gonna do a little jumper in between. So that's gonna allow you to do is basically give you a 4 ohm load for your amplifier, because it's dual 2 ohm voice coils. So you have to make sure you have this jumper in place, run this over, so you just basically kind of push that in there, screw it down, and then we'll plug this into our enclosure. All right, so on your 650 by 1 amp here, of course, we're in the wire to the back already, so we have our positive and negative. So we just look at the amp here. In this case, positive is on this side. Negative is on this side. And we've already got our power ground remote hooked up. So now the amp is ready to power us up. All right, so now we have our subwoofer enclosure. So this is a custom built enclosure with a single 12 ported, and it's gonna basically fit right here under the seat. Now the good part is you do not need to remove your screw box. So all you Jeep guys don't know how this is, all your screws, you take the top stuff off. You do not have to remove this, so we made sure of that. But everything else is gonna be, after you've removed that plastic shelf, we're gonna take the speaker, roll it in here. So then we have our connector. So it's already wired up. And plug that into there. And then we roll this guy down. And she fits. And the great part is, your seat still folds down. Now it's time to connect the speakers to the amp. As you can see, the harness is labeled for each location on the amplifier. Just simply follow the label locations and install the speakers to the amp, and always add some wire management.
What's up?
Now that all the key parts are in, we can begin reassembly of the vehicle. Then it's up to the radio in the front dash display. And onto our lower dash with the freshly installed JP-1020 grills.
What's up?
Now the upper dash with the light control. Down to the lower shroud. Over to the passenger handle. And now the AC and push to start button. Then the glove box. And now we have our new JP-1017 covers for the dash tweeters on both the driver and passenger side. Simply clip to the factory location. Reinstall the 2 front seats into the Jeep and make sure the feet of the amp racks are under the seat mounts and secure with the factory seat bolts. So there it is. We've installed the JP-PPKT-5 in an amplified 2024 Jeep Gladiator. If you have a non-amplified 2024 Gladiator, you can use the JP-PPKT-6, and the install is almost identical, except we built a harness that comes off the T-harness behind the radio and plugs directly into the Vibe DSP amp, so no RCAs are required. And for the 2020 to 2023 Jeep Gladiator, we have kits for both amplified and non-amplified systems. Check out all the available Vibe audio kits on our website at metraonline.com.